Story 1. This is a kind of dated example. We had a record player with a lid that was fully detached, not on hinges. To solve the problem of having to set this large lid down somewhere while playing records, my parents rigged a brass pulley hanging from the ceiling, with a counterweight on the cord and a small bent tube that provided just enough friction so that you could lift the lid and it would remain hanging wherever you left it. It was rather ingenious in a Wallace and Gromit kind of way, but I thought this was just a standard record player installation. I only found out otherwise when we studied simple machines in 3rd grade, and I had a homework assignment to draw simple machines I found around the house. I drew this device for pulley and completely baffled my teacher. Story 2. My older brother rigged up a pulley and counterweight system with a lower handle to the sliding screen back door so that the dog could open it and let herself out or in, and it would automatically close behind her. It was so well done that I honestly thought he had bought an add-on kit made for that door. But I later realized no one else had one at their house. It turns out my brother just made it out of materials we already had in Dad's shop. Story 3. This may be common for some families, but when I mentioned it to friends in high school, they were all surprised. My grandmother sent each grandchild a card for every holiday, and on the minor holidays, she would always include a $10 to $20 bill. I remember mentioning I had received my Valentine's Day money from my grandmother, and my friends were all confused. I guess their grandparents only gave gifts on Christmas and birthdays. Once we got older and she had great-grandchildren, she started sending them cards for all the holidays. My cousin lived in my grandmother's basement apartment, and my grandmother still sent the card in the mail so her great-grandson could be excited to receive some mail. My grandmother was the absolute best, and I miss her every day. Story 4. Corn on the cob with butter. Growing up, we had a separate butter dish, usually just a small plate, that we used to butter corn by rubbing the cob directly on the stick of butter and spinning it slowly. This is the best way to get complete and even butter coverage. I thought this was normal until my husband was amazed the first time he saw us do it. He has since accepted the genius of our approach, and we have taught our kids as well, though we have advised them not to do it at their friends' houses. Story 5. Folding empty disposable plastic grocery bags in a particular way. I did this automatically when at a friend's house for the first time before handing one to her, and she was impressed. She asked me to teach her, and we then spent 10 minutes folding all her saved plastic bags. I was glad to be able to pass on a useful skill for reducing the space they took up. Story 6. Asian millennial here. Growing up, I was made to believe that a dishwasher is just a drying rack and storage for hand-washed dishes and kitchenware. Story 7. I have a 4-inch semi-rigid dryer hose tube that I tied to the banister going to my basement. At the bottom of the stairs is a garbage can with a plastic bag for recyclable cans and bottles. Instead of having to go downstairs every time I have an empty can or bottle, I just send them down the chute. Story 8. Growing up in a lower-income household, we would place a 5-gallon bucket in the shower to catch the water until it began to warm up. Then you would take your shower over the bucket. You shut the water off while you soap up and then turn it back on to rinse. We then used the water from the bucket to pour into the toilet instead of flushing it. When friends came over, they'd ask, "What's up with the bucket?" And I would reply, "Doesn't everyone use a bucket?" Also, Ziploc bags are not single-use. You clean and reuse them just like plastic dishes. Plastic grocery bags are reused as trash can liners. Why do they even sell trash can liners? According to Dad. Story 9. My parents would always dilute the soda we had. They would open a 12-ounce can, pour an equal amount into 5 cups, and then add tap water to fill the cups the rest of the way up. I thought this was normal until I tried a full-strength can, and it was too sweet and fizzy. I think they were being very frugal. They would also cut a tall stack of paper napkins in half while sitting in front of the television to make them last longer. Story 10. My family would eat corn straight out of the can. We would just dump out the water and put the corn on a plate. It was not until I got to college and my roommates asked if I was a hobo that I realized it was not normal. Story 11. When I was a child, I used to be constipated a lot. My father got tired of always unclogging the toilet with a plunger. He told me to stop flushing whenever I finally had a bowel movement. So whenever I finally had a bowel movement, he would fetch a garbage bag and fish it out like you would pick up dog waste. I thought it was the most normal thing. Story 12. Sock basket. All socks from any load of laundry went into a basket on the bottom shelf of the hall linen closet. When you got dressed, you tried your best to find the matching pair. Story 13. Not sure if it counts as a hack, but washing out soap and shampoo bottles can be useful. Most people just toss them when they start spurting rather than dispensing soap. We would add a little water and shake the bottle to get a bit more out. Story 14. My mom wrote the date on the lids of things she opened, such as tomato sauce, so she would know when to throw them away. I do it too. Story 15. I saw on Reddit a man upset because his wife sprinkled baking soda on the carpet before vacuuming. I thought the idea was smart for removing odors. Story 16. My mother would cook ground beef in a pan, pour out the grease into an old margarine tub, and then put the ground beef in a conical sieve. We would mash it with a wooden tool to squeeze out every drop of grease. Finally, she would run it under tap water. I always wondered why it tasted better everywhere else until I cooked for myself. Story 17. My mom always cut bacon packages in half and then put them in sandwich bags in the freezer. The night before, she would toss one in the refrigerator to thaw, and then we would eat the half package. It was always enough bacon for the family. When I was in graduate school, I did the same thing, and my roommate looked at me like I was insane. I did not realize the half pieces of bacon were unusual. Story 18. When doing dishes, I put a couple of drops of soap in a bowl of hot water and dip my sponge in it to have a sudsy sponge for the entire load of dishes. Story 19. Take popcorn from home into the movie theater. If you are like my stepdad, make a fuss if you get called out. Get kicked out and go home with your now cold popcorn. Story 20. Not exactly a hack, but I was told as a small child to refer to my penis as my horsey. I would always think it was funny when people said, "Hold your horses." And when I was little, I would grab myself in response. Many years later, I got on the internet to see where that horse meaning penis thing came from and could find nothing. Apparently, it was just my family. Another thing I picked up as a kid that made things seem weird when exposed to the rest of the world was that I was taught going potty was synonymous with defecating. We never used that phrase for just going to the bathroom, and only when one needed to be specific. For example, I can't go behind a tree, Mom, I have to go potty. Potty basically meant poop to me. Then I got a job working in an office with a group of women, and they were always saying, "I need to go potty." I thought it was so gross that they were telling everyone that and making people imagine them taking a dump. I found out later that most people use "go potty" as a generic phrase for "go to the bathroom." Story 21. My family all shared towels until I loudly mentioned I did not like the idea of drying my face on the same towel someone else used for their body. Suddenly, we were assigned towels. Story 22. My mother stores boxes of cereal in the oven to keep them from going stale. I have never met anyone else who does this. Story 23. Hanger underwear involves keeping one pair of underwear on a hanger in your closet. When you fall behind on laundry and run out of underwear, you have that lifeline and know you must do laundry. Story 24. Patting the grease off of pizza to reduce calories when I was about 12. I think if you do this for your children without them knowing, it is fine. There is nuance, of course. My experience was being actively encouraged by my mother to do it so I would not gain weight. I did not realize this is something parents may do before giving their children pizza because I was always doing it myself alongside my mother to stay thin. Story 25. We would go to buffets right at the end of breakfast just before they switched to lunch and get a little of both for breakfast pricing. Story 26. My household functions on practical tips that others may not use. Here is one I like to share that I learned from someone else, though some people already do it. Keep a refillable dish brush filled with Dawn dish soap in every shower. You can also use power wash if you prefer. Since attention difficulties may cause you to skip thoroughly cleaning the shower and tub, you can spend a few minutes cleaning while you are showering. Story 27. Use a turkey baster to remove grease from a pan when cooking ground beef. My mom did it growing up, so I thought it was normal. My wife thought it was witchcraft the first time she saw me do it. She immediately called her mom and sister to tell them to try it. Story 28. Twice a month we would go to a fast food restaurant for dinner or my mom would get takeout. Anytime it was McDonald's, She would get the 69-cent hamburgers and make us put cheese on them at home because she was not going to spend an extra 10 cents for a slice of cheese. Story 29. Virtually everybody I have ever met uses pizza cutters incorrectly. They all hold it with the circular blade sticking out of the top of their clenched fist, then use the thumb to apply pressure. This is a suboptimal grip because cutting the pizza requires keeping the wrist at an unnatural angle, and the pressure you can apply with your thumb is limited. The correct way to use a pizza cutter is to hold the handle so that the circular blade comes out from the bottom of your clenched fist. This way, the wrist stays in line with the arm, and you can apply downward pressure with the full strength of your forearm, resulting in a cleaner and easier cut. I include simple ASCII art to show the correct position. Underscore forward slash dash underscore slash backslash underscore slash. Story 30. Whenever I have something I need to take with me to work or wherever I am planning to go, I put it in a plastic grocery bag and hang it from the doorknob so I have to physically touch it to leave the house. It is still possible to forget, but I forget less often this way than simply setting it on the counter. Story 31. Putting a cut raw potato in soup or sauce that is too salty pulls the salt into the potato without ruining the food. My wife looked at me like I was an alien. Story 32. We have a house window fan. We did not have central air until I was about 12. We had a 28-inch fan that you set on exhaust, and then anywhere in the house you open a window, you get a breeze. Everyone in my family does this, but I have never met anyone outside my family who does. The fans are from around 1975, and I inherited mine from my aunt when she moved into a senior living apartment. It is nice in the spring and fall. Story 33. On our annual one-week family vacation, we would pack old clothes, underwear, and socks and discard them each day. We would come home to new socks, underwear, and back-to-school clothes that my mother bought. Story 34. Here's a weird one. I'm the mom of my nuclear family, and I just found out a couple of years ago that my kids didn't see a reason for top sheets. Once they were old enough to do laundry, I let them handle it. I never noticed until 2/3 of them left home that they just used a bottom sheet and a comforter or blanket as bedding. I've come around to this way of thinking and do the same. Also, my husband and I have our own separate comforters. No one pulls the covers off the other. It's great when you realize you don't have to do things the standard way. Story 35. When I was a child, my parents always kept the boxes of crackers on top of the water heater tank to keep them fresher. The constant mild heat reduced the humidity. We always had crispy saltine crackers. Story 36. When ice cream used to come in the cardboard rectangle, my grandmother would slice it like cake and peel the cardboard off after putting it on the serving plate. She would cover the unused block with plastic wrap and secure it with a rubber band. I was always confused watching my friends carefully scoop it out. Story 37. After my sister graduated and my dad moved out, my mom created a very thoughtful system that worked well for us. We both really liked certain foods, and we never withheld food from one another. For example, if my favorite pizza only had one piece left, I would put it in a plastic bag or Tupperware and then put a rubber band around it. That was our silent signal to each other that we were saving it for lunch the next day. My mom and I are incredibly close, and that might sound kind of odd, but it was a good way to respect one another and make sure we had some of our favorites left when we got home. My friends would sometimes come over and wonder why there was a rubber band on a certain can of soda, and only then would I realize that not every family did this. Story 38. We use a cutter knife to cut a lotion or sunscreen plastic bottle in half to get every bit out. It is expensive and there is a lot left inside. Story 39. My mom is a type 1 diabetic, so we always had alcohol pads around the house. Besides using them for their intended purpose, she also used them to clean something sticky or to remove permanent marker from surfaces. I naturally did the same. My freshman year roommate was also diabetic, so she did the same. It wasn't until I lived with a non-diabetic for the first time that I realized not everyone keeps a box of alcohol pads at home for random spot cleaning. I still keep a box at home. Story 40. Putting bread in the refrigerator is normal. However, it can make you the person with cold sandwiches. Story 41. Never throw away papers. Place all papers under every conceivable surface. Cover the surface with a nice tablecloth. Tada. Clean. Story 42. Maybe not a hack, but we used empty toilet paper rolls as cord holders. I still do it to this day, as do my kids. The first time I traveled with my high school team and took out my curling iron, everyone asked, "What is that?" They were half mocking and half amazed. This happened every time I traveled with someone. I do wonder if any of those people implemented the idea. Story 43. I thought it was normal to make grilled cheese in the oven using the broil setting, which makes 6 sandwiches at once. I have since learned that everyone else I know cooks single sandwiches on the stove. Our family method makes the nicest, most evenly toasted, light brown, buttery deliciousness. Stove sandwiches are dry and bland. Story 44. I lost my job and had to move in with my brother for a while. We hadn't lived together since we were living back home. Now we're in our early to mid-30s living together. There were the usual things that annoyed each other. Taking food that wasn't ours, being loud, not cleaning up after ourselves. Typical roommate behavior. I eventually landed a new job with a 9 to 5 schedule. My brother worked 4 p.m. to midnight shifts. His free time was late at night. He would game all night and snack not just pizza and chips, but prepare full gourmet meals like a whole chicken with sides. I would watch him eat an entire chicken if I stayed up late enough. I would head to bed while he was still in his multi-hour gaming session. I would get up and head to work, and he would still be on the sofa playing the same game from the night before. After my shift, I would come home. If he wasn't home when I arrived, I figured he was at work. When I went to the bathroom, before opening the door, a smell hit me. My brother had been using the toilet and not flushing. During his marathon gaming session, he had been going without flushing. I estimate the toilet water was more than 50% urine. It was a dark yellow color, the kind your body uses to tell you to drink water. I flushed it. When he came home, I asked why he wasn't flushing. He said it was to save water and money. It was his hack to save money. No argument could convince him he was wrong. He's been single for a long time now. If you're wondering, he probably still doesn't flush. I haven't asked since I already know his answer. Story 45. We make sweet tea in the coffee maker. Just put the tea bags in the part where you would put the coffee grounds, and you do not need a filter. Story 46. Putting food scraps in a small bin in the freezer until collection day means there is no rotting food in the indoor bins. Everyone I show this to is astounded by the logic. I thought it was normal. Story 47. In the winter, my dad would tie plastic sandwich bags over our feet before we put our boots on. This kept our feet dry when we inevitably got snow jammed down our boots while playing. I recounted this to my husband once, and he was very confused. Apparently, it was just a thing my dad did. It was smart, though. We never had freezing wet feet. I plan to do the same with my child. Story 48. Making spaghetti bolognese just using tomato sauce. Using pegs for multiple pieces of clothing on the line, for example, for pairs of underwear pegged together and t-shirt ends pegged together in a line. Once I left home, it was examples like these that made me realize we didn't have money like other families did. Now I have enough pegs, so many pegs, for every piece of clothing, and it makes me feel rich. Oh, and I learned what real spaghetti bolognese tastes like. When I say tomato sauce, I mean what Australians put on their meat pies and hot chips, the condiment similar to what Americans call ketchup. Story 49. We had tapas night every Friday. The tapas were all the leftovers that had accumulated during the week. Story 50. My dad had a wrench to open our car door handle. We also had to crawl through one door to unlock the other. Another car had a hole that led right to the ground. We would throw things through the hole as we drove, like Cheerios or goldfish. It was the size of a baseball. As an adult, I realized how dangerous that was. Story 51. Cupcake sandwich. Remove the bottom of the cupcake and put it on the top. This protects you from getting frosting all over your face and makes it easier to bite. My in-laws all do this now. Story 52. For pancakes, I get the stack and butter them. then cut a cross in the middle, then let syrup seep into the cross and saturate through the cake stack in the middle. I got tired of pouring syrup over the top and having dry pancakes except the top one. Story 53. In the morning, we would take off our pajamas and put them under the pillow. We wore them again the next night. I do not know how often they got changed, but it was at least once a week. Story 54. Putting the duvet cover on by turning it inside out, sticking your hands in, grabbing the corners of the duvet, and giving it a shake so it turns right side out with the duvet inside. I never understood why people said they could not put the cover on without help. Story 55. Keeping bread in the microwave instead of a bread box. I thought everyone did it until I went to a friend's house and saw an actual bread box for the first time. Story 56. Not paying for city trash service and taking it to a business park dumpster every week. I thought everyone's trash day was this whole errand. I was a very sheltered kid and thought my parents were saving a lot of money. It wasn't until I moved out and found out how much it actually costs that I realized they were just cheap and kind of gross. Story 57. Damp paper towels on leftover salads keep them crisp for days. My husband thought my family was nuts but now considers it genius. Story 58. I know some people put water in the detergent container to get all of it out when it gets low, to get the most from the container. I do the same with lotion. When it feels like it has run out, a lot of the lotion is actually stuck to the inside of the container, and I have found that a little bit of water loosens it. Story 59. Bless the food that goes into the microwave. I get strange looks from coworkers when I wet my hands and sprinkle a little water on the old pizza before it goes in the microwave. Story 60. I do not think many people do this, but it works. Pour boiling water over cloves of garlic before peeling them. The skin then comes off very easily. Story 61. In the winter, my parents insisted on heating the kitchen by turning on the oven and leaving the oven door open. Story 62. My mom did something unusual where she would put washed wool clothes under the rugs in the house, sandwiched between pieces of newspaper to keep them clean. The weight of the rug and people walking over it would press the clothes flat. It was like ironing knitwear. Every time you walked over the rug, you could feel something underneath. She acted like this was completely normal, but when I searched for it, nothing came up, and I have never heard of anyone else doing this. Story 63. Placing something in a very inconvenient or unusual place to remind you to do something important. I have found my mom's keys in the fridge and learned to just leave them there. They are there to remind her to grab something important, probably her lunch, before she goes to work. I make sure to text her to let her know I saw them, just in case she did it by accident. Why is there a ladder by the door? A random fork on the kitchen countertop? A bottle of medicine balanced precariously on the alarm panel? I have no clue, but it is there for a reason and I need to leave it there. Story 64. I never drank a full egg until I was an adult because I could not stand it. My parents would cut it to half and half. They explained dessert as white bread, butter, and sugar, and people just stared at me while I explained it. Story 65. Immediately stop a nosebleed by wadding up a piece of paper and placing it under your upper lip. Story 66. We stacked flattened cereal boxes in the cat litter box, then put shredded newspapers on top. This was our cat litter. We cleaned it after the cat pooped and removed all layers of wet cereal boxes. We added new boxes on the bottom and fresh, shredded newspapers on top. Totally normal, right? Story 67. We eat cereal out of plastic cups. My mother started giving it that way when we were children, and we still do it 40 years later. It is just more portable than a bowl. Story 68. Chopsticks are useful for everything because when you become skilled with them, they act as extensions of your fingers. They are excellent for turning bacon. Story 69. Color-coded dishes for us children. Then we definitely knew who left their cereal bowl under the couch. Story 70. Put a big pot of water in the freezer. When it becomes ice, take it out and put it behind your air conditioner. Story 71. Setting out bowls of white vinegar and water and maybe lemon juice when someone in the family has a cold or influenza. Story 72. I do not know if it makes us weird, but we lay rolled up towels down by the front and back doors. I grew up in the city, and there were slight gaps at the bottom of the doors. We used to roll up thick towels and put them tightly against the doors. This helped to keep air from leaking under the doors, especially in the winter. It was the best way growing up to keep out unwanted cold air. Story 73. My dad taught us to make lizard catchers out of weeds that grow all over here. My friends would come over and I would make catchers and we would catch lizards in the yard. A friend caught a horny toad with one on vacation and brought it back for me as a gift to thank me for teaching him to make them. Turned out not every kid makes them. Story 74. This is from when I was a kid. We had communal socks on the dining room table. My parents divorced when I was young, and it was just me, my brother, and my dad for a few years. We all shared the same white athletic socks, and we never kept them in our rooms. We never ate in the formal dining room, and it was always covered in socks. Each morning, we would each take a pair from the big mound on the table. It was just socks. I have no idea why. All our other clothes were kept in our rooms. We had a lot of socks for some reason, way more than we needed. They covered the table. This went on until my dad met his next wife. She put a stop to it. Story 75. When one of us is sick or has a sore throat, we always make sure to have Jell-O on hand. Instead of putting the liquid Jell-O in the fridge to set, we drink it hot from a mug. It is very soothing on a scratchy throat and makes being sick a little less terrible. Bonus. My sister-in-law taught us that eating a spoonful of peanut butter is an instant hiccup cure. Story 76. Put a fresh piece of bread at the bottom of the cookie jar. Keeps the cookies soft. I know it sounds strange, but it works. I still do this when I send a large container of homemade cookies to our college children, so they are not dried out by the time the shipping process delivers them. Story 77. We used to have our kids set out half of their Halloween candy for the Great Pumpkin after they finished trick-or-treating. The Great Pumpkin would leave a gift for each of them, typically a toy they really wanted, as thanks. We wanted to do it to reduce the amount of candy they were eating. It worked well until they reached school age and their friends started asking what the Great Pumpkin was. Story 78. It seems like more than half the things you cook for dinner require boiling water. I make boiling water in large batches when I am just sitting around and freeze it. That way, when I want to cook something, I just heat up some frozen boiling water and it is ready to go. This saves a lot of time. Story 79. Not putting leftovers in the refrigerator. Just cover them with a clear cloche and walk away. If they ended up in the refrigerator, they never got eaten. Under the cloche, 9 out of 10 times someone would have a midnight snack. Story 80. Topic. People realizing the weird things their families do are totally normal, including someone whose father regularly fishes their stool out of the toilet. Story 81. We used empty butter tubs as food containers. I learned the hard way when I tried to make toast with leftover spaghetti sauce. Story 82. Eat tomatoes whole like an apple. No salt, pepper, or anything else. The first time my dad packed one for my lunch in middle school, I immediately earned the nickname Tomato in an affectionate way. I was bullied for other reasons. Ironically, I cannot eat tomatoes or anything made from tomatoes due to gastroesophageal reflux disease. Story 83. Okay. So my wife and I are Burmese, born in Burma, but our son is born here in Australia. In Southeast Asia, they usually have bidet sprayers next to toilets, and my wife really wanted one. At the time, it had not caught on yet in Australia, and plumbers were very reluctant to install them even if you bought one from Asia. So I went to Bunnings one day, bought a new weed sprayer, cut the nozzle short, and just used that instead. My son just grew up with that. When he started kindergarten, my poor boy was just so confused. Story 84. My dad is just weird. He puts soda cans in the freezer to get them cold faster, then gets upset when they explode. He has been doing this for years. Story 85. My wife's story about her family is as follows. Their family liked to have ham on holidays, bone-in, and the first task was always to cut the end of the bone off. A tedious job with no obvious value to the meal, but it was always done. My wife's mother did it for years. My wife finally asked why they did this. Her mother did not know, so we went up the ladder to my wife's grandmother. Hey, Nan, why do you cut off the ham bone before you cook it? Because it was the only way it fit in the pan that we had. Glad it didn't reach my generation. But my mother-in-law was upset that she wasted a lot of time and effort cutting off that bone holiday after holiday. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.